So now we move on to the presentations by our students. First up, we have Kavitha Gunesekera, Associate Vice President, People Growth Fortude, and her research title, Leaders, Do They Have What It Takes, or Can They Learn It? Exploring Gender and Leadership in Today's Changing Tech Industry. Thank you. It was organizational psychologist and author Adam Grant. Such thing as a natural leader. Everyone starts out with strengths and shortcomings. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here, making time for learning. In April 2019, well, at least starting off with April 2019, all the way through to today, particularly in Sri Lanka, we had numerous crises, of which COVID was just one. And something that inspired me during this time was just watching women leaders stepping up to challenges that they perhaps had never before even dreamt of or thought of, and not just stepping up to the challenge, but really overcoming them. And so when the opportunity came to really look at research in this area, it was almost a no-brainer to look at it from the lens of gender and leadership. Going into a little bit now of what the reading allowed me to take a look at. Brown in 2017 spoke about leaders capturing people's imagination. And this is something that I found really beautiful, because when we think of leaders, we often think of individuals who reach some measure of success. And we'll talk about measures of success in a moment, but capturing the imagination is something a little bit different than what we're really used to. Brown also refers to this aspect called discretionary effort, or in other words, how individuals respond to leaders based on how they're treated or how they feel. And the interesting question that came to my mind was, how do you do this when you're in the middle of, for example, a national crisis, or even worse, a global crisis? A little bit more on the research and the reading now. In 2013, a study conducted at the University of Birmingham with just a group of students and trying to understand whether there was anything to the concept of a glass cliff. So just to expand a little bit, the glass ceiling, which many of us may have heard about, is where females reach a certain point in their career. The glass cliff, on the other hand, is where a female is elected or put into leadership, where the odds are more often than not against her, and perhaps often set up to fail almost. What this study, Carol Ford and Taylor speaks about, is that they actually ask the question: is there anything specific? I mean, are they somewhat standing in the way of females? And this whole concept of the glass cliff. And incidentally, while there were responses like females are expected to take some time off to be a parent, or females are expected to take some time to be a caregiver, there really wasn't anything about females can't be a CEO, or females can't have a place of leadership. So a little bit more in terms of what transforms, in terms of transformation and leadership. Usually when we think of a leader, we think of what they look like, or how they've made us feel perhaps, or some experiences that we've had with them in the past. So this brought me to the aspect of traits and what we perceive as individuals perhaps looking at leaders. What does that mean? So Taylor in 2019 speaks of leadership traits. Some people have them, some people don't. They are a personal possession, meaning that they can't be taken away. And very often, according to Taylor's research, they are in place from birth. So thinking of this glass cliff phenomenon a little bit more, and this was another interesting study in 2010, when it was a smooth sailing time for an organization. These two researchers, Brackman and Branscombe, found that it was more often than not a male leader was promoted or given a place of leadership. Whereas when it was a time of crisis, it was a female leader instead. And diving a little bit more deeper there, stereotypically female attributes. So there's a long list. We don't have time to go into the long list, but I'll just point out three. So in this 2010 study by Brackman and Branscombe, three of the leadership traits for females, one was relationship, the other was compassion, the other was empathy. Three of the leadership traits for males that came out of the study: determination, confidence, and self-efficacy. So in other words, if we compare the types of words that these are, more often than not, the female leadership traits which came out of the study were more on other or focused towards another, whereas the male leadership traits which came out were more focused to self. Right. And why the tech industry, which was what was my focus of study that I conducted. So in 2022, SATSCOM and PwC, they release a report yearly on the salary survey, and it looks at the comparatives across various different parameters. But in terms of gender, it's found that there's a 65 to 35 ratio of male to females in the ICT industry. And this had kept growing. So it has progressively started off in 2018 with 25%. So obviously there was scope for growth irrespective of gender. Now, a little bit more on what this study meant. So putting a lens onto this Barney environment: brittle, anxious, non-linear, three of the different aspects of Barney, B-A-N. And looking at what the country as well as the world had gone through, how did leadership traits impact how us as individuals viewed leaders? And secondly, was there a difference in that viewpoint between male and female genders? Okay, so we knew that we were talking about the Barney environment, that was premise one, and then of course the ICT industry, which was filtering down further. Looking at leadership, but leadership in terms of perceived leadership traits, and of course the impact of gender. Now, in terms of leadership traits, there are multiple different theories, but I chose to look at it from a transformational leadership perspective, and looking at it from, if there's a leader, then there's got to be a follower or someone who's reporting to that leader, or a team that's reporting to the leader. Is there a positive affinity or a negative affinity to the leader? And if it's positive affinity, is it because of intellectual stimulation, idealized influence, and we'll talk about what all of these mean in just a moment, inspirational motivation, or individualized consideration? And then, of course, in terms of gender, for the purpose of the study, gender was considered in terms of binary, male and female, and of course, whether there was career advancement in each of these different leader stories. Right, a little bit now about what this means. So Bates and Abolio in 1985 came up with a survey on what transformational leadership could be quantified as. So these were the four parameters, and the survey that there was qualitative as well as quantitative. And the quantitative aspect of the research was based on the Bates and Abolio 1985 study. So four very interesting parameters of leadership, transformational leadership to be precise. One is the aspect of charisma. So the Oxford Dictionary 2023, I think, made which is the shortened form of charisma, the most used word. But incidentally, it was still something that was very much prevalent and thought of as a leadership aspect in the 1980s. So is the leader a true role model? Is this individual someone who others can look up to? And then, of course, in terms of inspiration and motivation, does the leader communicate high expectations, but not just communicate it, also support followers to really reach those expectations? Intellectual stimulation, if there are problems to solve, does the leader sponsor innovative ways of problem solving? And of course, individualized consideration, is there a supportive climate of coaching or mentoring or advice? So let's take a look at some of the results. So there were several leader statements under each of these 4 parameters that we just spoke about. And the highest scoring statements are up on screen. The leader displays a sense of power and confidence. The leader expresses confidence that goals will be achieved. And the leader talks enthusiastically about what needs to be accomplished. And so, looking at the findings in a little bit more detail, we see the pink color for the female leaders and the blue for the male leaders. And while we see individualized considerations scoring an overall average here of 81%, there was a big difference between the scores for male leaders on inspirational motivation and female leaders on inspirational motivation. So I'm just going to take a step back what inspirational motivation was. Communicating high expectations, but also supporting the team to commit to that vision and follow through on it. Moving to a little bit more on the findings. So again, in terms of change, in terms of overall scores, when you looked at the quantitative aspect of it, it was the female leaders who scored higher on the overall gender-wise scores. And there were also these qualitative aspects where there were interviews conducted with leaders themselves. And interestingly, some more words, so drawing attention back to what we came up with, Branscombe and Rachmaninov. Some of the words that came out again for the female leaders in this particular study: empathy, multitasking, trustworthiness and responsibility, and the ability to listen. And for the male leaders, reduced burden of childcare, more cut and dry, getting along better with other males, especially from leaders to subordinates, and usually more perceptive to technology. All right. So a few things that came up as a result. In terms of recommendations, because there's so many of you here from industry, one of the aspects that really this study helped me think about, how do we measure organizational success? A lot of the time we think of organizational success as being associated with numerics, of course, usually to do with how well an organization is profiting from the kind of work that they're doing. But how do we measure success of individuals? Do we have the opportunity to perhaps think about how success is measured in times of change? At the same time, looking at this particular box, we have the words inspirational motivation coming up. How do we do this for leaders? Does there need to be leadership development which goes down this road? Coaching or mentoring which comes into this place? And if so, how do we allow women who are potential future leaders to perhaps be paired with existing leaders or women leaders so that there is a better trajectory for their success? And my colleague will talk about a little bit more on how that trajectory works sometimes. And then, of course, increasing transparency in the promotion process, really looking at what is sometimes that expected. What do organizations look for when it comes to really moving an individual from where they are now to what they could be? And last but not least, ensuring that programs are accessible to all, irrespective of gender. Are we looking at who we nominate to enter programs? Are we looking at who we nominate to enter, for example, fast-track programs? Is there a balance in gender? And if there isn't, for example, where does it need to change? Is it at, for example, the talent acquisition space, where we're attracting more talent? Do we need to retain more females? And how do we do that? I kept this particular finding till the very last, because this was again, remember, on the conceptual framework. How have these leaders who we spoke of in this particular study advanced in the 1 to 2 years that the person who was taking the survey observed? And interestingly, we did have more male leaders who came up in the survey as opposed to female leaders. And we did see that there was career advancement for the females, but look at the disparity between the two genders. What does that mean for us as organizations? So this was a little bit of a survey which was conducted in partnership with Slack's Future Forum. This is a Harvard Business Review study which was published late last year. Which of the following statements best describes companies' response to DEI? So that was the question that was posed to different companies, over 10,000 knowledge workers in 6 countries. And today I'd like to invite you all to ask yourselves as different industry leaders this question too. Which of the following statements best describes our company's approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion? Approach 1, awareness. In other words, DEI is new to my organization and we are just becoming aware of its importance. Approach 2, compliant. DEI may be new to the organization, but it's focused on compliance with equal employment opportunities and other legal requirements. Approach 3, tactical. DEI has been connected to business initiatives and outcomes in pockets of the organization. Approach 4, integrated. DEI is part of everything we do as an organization. We have both internal and external efforts of DEI. And of course, the ideal state, approach 5, sustainable. DEI efforts are best in class and remain strong over time through our efforts to continuously improve and evolve. And interestingly, we see several of the responses being in the compliance stage. Almost actually over a third of responses were in the compliance stage. So thanks to Next, we had the opportunity to dig deeper and look at what possibly could change for the future, not just for females, but also leaders in general, and what perhaps we could learn from each other's genders too. And hopefully, with the different types of learning that we have and the different studies that our eyes have been open to, we'll be able to move not just from being compliant organizations, but all the way to integrated and sustainable organizations in the future. Just to quote Sheryl Sandberg, who I'm sure is no stranger, we often think of the corporate ladder, and there's only one way to get to the top of a corporate ladder. But leadership is a jungle gym, the one that you find in the playground that's got lots of different bars. And there are many ways to get across a jungle gym. Thank you so much.